What if a mother asked Jesus to protect her son from all harm, and he never learned to stand on his own? Ethan was 8 years old when he watched his brother die right in front of him. Hit by a car, blood, screams, and he couldn't do anything. Sarah fell into total despair. She locked herself in the church for 3 straight days, without eating, without sleeping, just crying and screaming at God, until she made the request, "Protect my son from all harm. Never let him suffer again. I beg you." And something changed. Ethan never got hurt again, never lost anything again, never felt real pain again. 24 years went by, and now, at 32 years old, he is on the edge of an abyss that no one else sees. Because while everyone around him breaks, bleeds, falls, and rebuilds themselves stronger, he remains intact. And it is destroying him from the inside. He looks at his own hands and realizes he's never had a scar that told a real story. He never felt the pain that transforms a man. He never achieved anything that cost something real. And now the question suffocating him isn't why me? It's worse. Who am I if I never had to become anyone? The first time Ethan realized something was wrong, he was 12 years old. He was playing soccer with his friends. One of them fell, scraped his knee, and cried out in pain. Ethan tripped on the same rock seconds later. Nothing happened, literally nothing. He looked at his knee, not even a scratch, and he felt afraid, not of the pain, but of the absence of it. At 15, when everyone in school had their heart broken for the first time, Ethan also fell in love. The girl said no. He waited for the pain. He waited to feel that emptiness everyone described. Nothing came. Just a nothing. At 18, he lost his grandfather. Everyone was crying at the funeral. He tried to cry too. He couldn't, not because he was strong, but because something inside him simply wouldn't break. Sarah noticed, and she thanked God every day. My son is protected. My son is safe. She didn't see what was happening to Ethan. He was growing up, but he wasn't maturing. He was living, but he wasn't feeling. And the more time passed, the more he became a specter in his own life. At 25, while his friends told stories of failures that became lessons, of scars that became strength, of pains that became wisdom, Ethan had nothing to tell. No battles won, because there was never a battle. No real achievements, because nothing ever cost him anything real. And at 32, he finally understood. Jesus' protection wasn't a shield. It was a prison. Because you can't be strong if you've never needed strength. You can't be brave if you've never faced real fear. And you can't find yourself if you've never been lost. Ethan is empty, completely empty. And for the first time in his life, he wants to feel pain. Real pain, because only then will he know he's alive. Ethan spent his entire adolescence thinking he was lucky. While his friends broke their arms playing football, he never got hurt. While they got rejected and cried for days on end, he never felt the real pain of rejection. It seemed like a blessing. Sarah watched her protected son grow up and gave thanks. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for taking care of him. But at 18, something started to change. Ethan was at his high school graduation. Everyone was sharing stories. People laughed telling stories about that time they broke their arm trying to impress someone. About the first love that destroyed them inside, but that taught them what real love was. About the test they failed that made them study like never before. Ethan had no stories like that. He tried to join the conversation. I also once ... but he stopped. Because there was nothing to tell. No scars, no defeats, no overcoming. And for the first time, he felt ashamed, not of failing, but of never having failed. At 20, he started college. That's when the overprotection began to show its darker side. Everyone around him was learning to deal with frustration, with difficult exams, with unfair professors. With competitive classmates, Ethan passed everything without real effort. Not because he was a genius, but because something always conspired in his favor. The professor would change the test at the last minute, and it would be easier. The classmate would drop the internship that Ethan wanted. Things just happened. And the more they happened, the emptier he felt. Because every victory without a fight is a victory without taste. And he was starting to understand that. He had a friend named Liam. He failed his junior year of college. Ethan remembers seeing Liam crying in the university bathroom. Defeated, humiliated, broken. 6 months later, Liam came back different, stronger, more determined, more alive. He passed with the best grades in the class. And when he told the story, there was fire in his eyes. I learned who I am when I fell. I learned that I'm capable of getting back up. Ethan looked at his own life and realized he had never fallen. He had never needed to get up. And because of that, he never found out if he was capable. At 23, he started working. While everyone else faced difficult bosses, impossible deadlines, constant pressure, Ethan had a strangely peaceful journey. Not because he was exceptional, but because the difficulties never reached him. The complicated project went to someone else. The difficult client canceled before Ethan had to deal with them. The pressure always veered away, and he began to realize something terrible. He wasn't growing. Everyone around him was maturing through pressure, developing resilience through their falls, building strength through their failures. But Ethan, he was frozen. A 23-year-old man with the emotional maturity of an overprotected child. And that terrified him. Because you don't develop muscles without resistance. You don't develop character without adversity. And he was realizing that Jesus' protection wasn't against evil. It was against life. At 25, he had a serious relationship. The girl's name was Emily. She was incredible, strong, determined, and she had deep emotional scars. She had been cheated on. She had trusted and been hurt. She had loved and lost. And all of this had made her a rich person. Deep, real. Ethan looked at her and felt small, because he had never felt real pain. And because of that, he couldn't understand hers. One day, Emily looked at him and said something that destroyed him. "Ethan, I love you, but you're empty. You've never suffered. You've never fought. You've never been tested. And I don't know if you're strong, or if you've just never needed to be." She ended the relationship 3 weeks later, and Ethan waited for the pain, waited to feel his heart break like everyone describes. Nothing came, just a feeling of nothing. And that's when he understood the most terrifying truth of his life. He wasn't protected from suffering. He was prevented from feeling. And that was infinitely worse. Because you can survive pain, but you can't survive the absence of life. At 28, he went to the funeral of a childhood friend. The guy had died in a car accident. Ethan was there, at the wake, watching the shattered family. The mother screaming, the father in silence, the siblings crying, and him, nothing. He tried to cry, forced the tears, but they wouldn't come. Not because he was cold, but because something inside him simply wouldn't break. And in that moment, he looked at the casket and envied his dead friend. Because at least he had lived, had felt, had loved, had suffered, had been real. Ethan was alive, but he wasn't living. He left the funeral and went straight to confront Sarah. "Mom, what did you do?" Sarah didn't understand. "What are you talking about, honey?" "That day, after Matthew died, you went to the church. You asked for something." Sarah turned pale. "I asked Jesus to protect you." "Protect me from what, Mom? From living?" "I didn't want you to suffer, Ethan. Not after what happened to your brother. But I need to suffer, Mom. I need to fall. I need to feel. Because if I don't feel pain, I don't feel anything." Sarah started to cry, but Ethan couldn't comfort her because he didn't know how. He had never learned to deal with pain, not his own, nor anyone else's. And this dependence on divine protection had robbed him of the only thing that matters, a free will to become someone through his own choices and consequences. He left home that day and didn't come back for months. He tried to force himself to feel. He went to street fights just to see if he would bleed. But even when he got hit, there were no marks. He invested all his money in a risky business just to see if he could lose. But the business suddenly succeeded. He tried to put himself in dangerous situations just to feel real fear. But something always protected him. And every time the protection kicked in, he felt the emptiness grow. Because you can't run from pain. You can avoid it. But when you avoid pain, you also avoid life. At 30, Ethan had a violent existential crisis. He was in a bar, alone, watching a group of friends laughing. They were telling stories of epic failures, of businesses that went bankrupt, of relationships that exploded, of dreams that died. And they were laughing because those failures had become the most important stories of their lives, the lessons that defined them. Ethan realized he had no stories. He had a life without content, a perfect resume, but with no substance, a journey without battles. And in that moment, something broke inside him. It wasn't pain. It was the awareness of its absence. He went home and did something he had never done. He prayed, but not to ask for protection, to ask for the opposite. Jesus, if you are listening to me, I beg you, take this protection away from me. Let me fall. Let me bleed. Let me feel. Because I'd rather have a short and real life than a long and empty one. Nothing happened. The protection continued. And Ethan understood the cruelest truth. He was trapped, not by chains, but by love. The love of a mother who couldn't let her son suffer, and the mercy of a God who doesn't break a promise. And now, at 32, Ethan is at the breaking point because he finally understood. It doesn't matter how many years he lives. If he can't feel, he will never be truly alive. Now tell me, if you could choose, would you prefer a long, protected life where nothing hurts you, but nothing transforms you? Or a short, brutal life where every scar teaches you who you really are? Ethan spent the next 2 years trying to break the protection, but nothing worked. Until at 32, something happened. Sarah had a stroke. Ethan got the call in the middle of the night. He rushed to the hospital, and for the first time in decades, he felt something pierce his chest. It wasn't physical pain. It was real panic, real fear. And for the first time, he understood. The protection didn't stop him from suffering for himself, but it stopped him from suffering for others. He entered the hospital room and saw Sarah in the bed. Frail, small, vulnerable, and something inside him finally broke. He sat by the bed and held her hand. "Mom, I love you, and I understand why you did it." Sarah opened her eyes slowly. Ethan ... double quotes. "You were afraid of losing me, like you lost Matthew, and I never blamed you for it. But now I need you to let me go." Sarah started to cry. "I don't know how, son. You just have to ask. The same way you asked to protect me." Sarah closed her eyes, and for the first time in 24 years, she prayed the reverse prayer. "Jesus, I beg you, let my son live truly. Let him fall. Let him feel. Let him be free. Because I understand now, protecting him from everything is the same as stealing his life." Nothing happened immediately. Ethan left the hospital that dawn and went for a walk. It was raining. He crossed the street without looking, and for the first time in his life, a car almost hit him. The driver honked, yelled, and sped past, just grazing him. Ethan stopped in the middle of the street, feeling his heart pounding, the real fear, the adrenaline, and he smiled. because for the first time, he had felt the possibility of death, and that made him feel alive. He went home, and for the first time, he cried for everything he had never felt, for all the lost years, for all the pain he was never allowed to carry. And that cry was the most liberating thing in his life, because pain is not punishment. Pain is proof that you are alive. In the following months, Ethan began to live for real. He started a business he always wanted, but was afraid to. The business almost failed 3 times. And every time he thought about giving up, he felt the real weight of responsibility. And that forced him to grow. For the first time, he had to fight for something. And when he finally managed to stabilize the business, the victory had a taste. The taste of sweat, of sleepless nights, of difficult decisions. And he realized that was the difference. You don't value what costs you nothing. He started dating again. And this time, when he got dumped, it hurt. It really hurt. He spent days thinking about what he had done wrong, questioning his worth, feeling the rejection burning in his chest. And it was horrible, but it was also necessary, because he learned something about himself through that pain. He learned that he was capable of feeling, and that feeling was the only way to truly know himself. Months later, he met someone else. And this time, when he fell in love, it was different. Because he knew what it was to lose. He knew what it was to risk. And because of that, every moment with her had weight. He wasn't just existing beside her. He was choosing to be there. And when she said she loved him, he cried. Because for the first time, he knew what that meant. Love is not the absence of pain. Love is the choice to open yourself up to pain. Ethan went back to visiting Sarah at the hospital every week. She was recovering slowly. And one day, she looked at him and said something that changed everything. "You look different, son." "I am, Mom. I'm alive. And I'm so sorry I took that away from you." Ethan held her hand. "You didn't take it. You tried to protect me. And I understand. But now I've learned something that no one could teach me. Pain isn't the enemy. The absence of it is." Sarah smiled with tear-filled eyes. "I was so afraid of losing you, ... And I almost lost myself because of that fear, Mom. Because you can't protect someone from life. You can only prepare them. And the only way to prepare them is to let them fall." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Do you forgive me?" Ethan smiled. "Only if you forgive me for taking so long to understand." They sat there, in silence, for a few minutes. And for the first time, Ethan felt a real connection with his mother. Not because she protected him, but because she had freed him. 3 months later, Ethan was in a business meeting. The proposal he had made was rejected. He lost a big contract, and he felt the frustration rising. He felt the anger, the disappointment, the fear of failure. But this time, he didn't run from those feelings. He felt them completely. And then, he got up and went after another client, because he had learned something fundamental. Failure is not the end. Failure is the beginning of resilience. And you only develop resilience when something inside you is truly tested. 6 months later, Ethan was in a park. He saw a father holding a small child who was learning to walk. The boy took 3 steps and fell. He started to cry. And the father didn't run to pick him up. He stayed there on his knees with his arms open, waiting. "Get up, son. You can do it." The boy stopped crying, looked at his father, and tried again. He fell 2 more times. But on the 3rd try, he made it to his father. And when he arrived, the father hugged him with such force that Ethan felt it from a distance. Because that father had understood something that Sarah took years to learn. You don't help someone by preventing their falls. You help by being there when they get back up. Ethan left the park and went straight to visit Sarah. She was home now, recovering well. "Mom, I need to thank you." Sarah looked at him, surprised. For what, son? Because you gave me 2 lives. The first, you protected me, and I understand why. But the second, you set me free. And this second life, I'm going to live it for real. Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with tears. You know what I learned, Ethan? What? That the greatest act of love isn't to prevent suffering. It's to be present in it. Ethan hugged his mother. And in that hug, there was something that had never existed before. 2 people who had been broken, and who had allowed themselves to grow through the cracks. Today, Ethan is 33 years old. He has scars now, on his body and in his soul. He has failed 3 times in the last year. He's had his heart broken twice. He's lost money, he's lost time, he's lost people. And he has never been happier in his life, because he understood the most important truth of human existence. You are not here to be protected. You are here to be transformed. And transformation only happens through pressure. A diamond isn't born a diamond. It's born as coal. And it only becomes a diamond because it was squeezed, pressured, broken. A butterfly isn't born flying. It's born trapped in a cocoon. And it only flies because it fought to get out. And you are not born strong. You are born fragile. And you only become strong when life breaks you and you choose to rebuild yourself. Sarah understood this late, but she understood. And Ethan forgave, because he realized that the overprotection was never about control. It was about fear. And fear is human. What matters is not never being afraid. It's learning not to let fear stop you from living, or from letting those you love live. The dependence Ethan had on divine protection was replaced by something much more powerful. Free will, the ability to choose, to fall, to get up, to be responsible for his own scars. And that is true maturity. It's not the absence of pain. It's the ability to carry pain and transform it into wisdom. Because life isn't about avoiding suffering. It's about learning from it. And if you are protecting someone from all pain, you are robbing that person of the only thing that truly matters, the chance to become who they truly can be. So maybe the real prayer isn't, protect my child from all harm, but rather, give my child the strength to face harm, the wisdom to learn from it, and the courage to get up when he falls. Because that is the difference between raising someone fragile and raising someone strong. And if there's one thing Ethan learned, it's that strength doesn't come from the absence of falls, but from the choice to get up every time you fall. And now that you understand the danger of excessive protection, you need to find out what happens when someone asks for the exact opposite, a life full of trials to prove their worth to God. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this story touched you. Maybe it made you think of someone you love. Or maybe it made you look at your own life in a different way. And that was no accident. Because every week I bring stories just like this. Stories that aren't just to pass the time. They are meant to make you feel, think, and grow. And if you want to keep receiving these stories, there's a simple way to make sure you don't miss any. Subscribe to the channel now. Because when you subscribe, you're not just pressing a button. You're saying, I want more of this in my life. And I promise that every story I bring will be worth every second of your time. So go ahead, subscribe, and come with me on this journey. Do you know what happens when love becomes a prison? Ethan's story showed you the weight of overprotection. How trying to protect someone from suffering can steal that person's very life. But there's another kind of protection that can imprison us. The protection of memories. I want to introduce you to a woman who lost the love of her life. And in the despair of her pain, she made a request to Jesus. Never let me forget his face. And Jesus granted it. But what she didn't imagine is that remembering everything every day with the same intensity as the first day can be crueler than forgetting. Because there is a limit to how long you can live in the past before you realize you've stopped living in the present. And now she has to make an impossible choice. Keep the memories and stay trapped, or let go and finally be free. If Ethan's story touched you, this one will destroy you in a different way. Because sometimes the greatest proof of love isn't remembering forever. It's having the courage to move forward. Give her story